You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're listening to us on CBS radio station 1580 AM in the Washington, D.C. area, or streaming on the web, WMClive.com, where you can also find links to podcasts of all our previous shows. And let us hear from you. Tweet us at hashtag WMCLive or email us at womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com. Now, get ready for a moving, surprising show. April is Poetry Month, and we are going to celebrate that. It's not just that I'm a poet, but that living, breathing poetry is distillation. It's intensity itself. It's the stuff that can make you laugh and cry and change your life. Not like the way it's usually taught, dull, fusty 19th century verse calculated to turn students off for the rest of their lives. Our guests, Alice Quinn, Joy Harjo, and Rita Dove, will turn you on for the rest of yours. But first we need to go inside the headlines. Now, as the investigation into the tragic Boston Marathon bombing proceeds, and as we concurrently pick ourselves up from the Senate floor after a manipulated filibustered vote against the mildest compromise gun control measures, of course, failed. But we pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, because we're not going to stop. We're on our own marathon about this. But as those two major news headlines hit, let's connect the dots. I've often said that the heart of patriarchy, the genius of it, as it were, is the capacity for compartmentalization. And the genius of feminism, the energy of feminism, is in making the connections. So let's make some. Do you know what a tagant is? That's T like Thomas, A-G-G-A-N-T. A tagant can mean a radio frequency that is a microchip used in automated identification and data capture. And ID tagans are microscopically color-coded particles that, if added to explosives or gunpowders during manufacturing, facilitate tracing those products after a bombing right back to the manufacturer. And then, through distribution records, tracing would continue through wholesaler and dealer levels to an original purchaser or point of theft. I mean, this is a wonderful idea. It's used in many European countries. It has stopped, or rather detected, who were the perpetrators of numerous bombings. It seems like a win-win. So why would there be any problems with tagans, and how would that be connected to gun control? Well, three little letters, the NRA. The NRA opposes a government initiative to require that black powder be chemically tagged with tagans for later tracing. The NRA has repeatedly beaten back provisions on tagans for years as various congresspeople have attempted to pass anti-terrorism bills. After Oklahoma City, there was another surge to try and pass a tagant measure. NRA beat it down. After the Olympics pipe bomb, again, each time the NRA mobilizes on their classic non-logic approach of the law hurts us, it isn't needed anyway, and it wouldn't work if it did pass us. So if it passed us and it didn't hurt us, then why? But never mind. It's nothing to do with logic. It's their same non-logic about laws banning armor-piercing bullets and semi-automatic weapons. If the NRA is protecting a hobby, in this case, as they claim, the right of sportsmen to purchase and hand-load black powder for sports shooting without having tagans imposed on them, then it is elevating a frivolity over public interest in being able to hold bombers responsible for hideous crimes. If, on the other hand, what they're about is, the right to revolution and overthrowing the government and the Second Amendment, then, first of all, I'd remind them that the British are long gone. The only standing army the NRA thinks we need to protect ourselves against is apparently our own government. But I mostly would refer you back to episode 23 of this program, which first aired on January 26th of this year, January 26, 2013, episode 23, where in Fighting Words we exposed how the Second Amendment really came to be, that actually its watchword name in Congress, or rather in the framers who were forming the Constitution, it stood for slave patrols. It was to ensure the arming of slave patrols in the slave-holding states so that they would not leave the Union. Episode 23 aired on January 26. That was the NRA. Before it was the NRA. And now it's impeding the search for the Boston bombers, as well as permitting atrocities daily with handguns. Good old NRA. Now, our first guest is Alice Quinn, who is Executive Director of the Poetry Society of America and an adjunct professor at Columbia University's Graduate School of the Arts. She was poetry editor of The New Yorker from 1987 to 2007, and at Alfred Knopf Publishers before that. She's the editor of Edgar Allan Poe and the Jukebox, Uncollected Poems, Drafts, and Fragments by Elizabeth Bishop, and she's currently at work editing Bishop's journals and notebooks. Welcome, Alice, to Women's Media Center Live. It's good to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Robin.
Well, start right now in medias res as Executive Director of the Poetry Society of America. You're uniquely situated by temperament as well as by position to give us a short trip through the state of poetry today in America, and particularly as it regards women poets.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I might say that for me, the biggest shift in American poetry in my lifetime is the result of Cave Canem and this tremendous upsurge, upswelling, kind of radiant flowering of African American poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And Toy Darracott and Cornelius Eady founded this Cave Canem 16, 17 years ago.
Yep.
They have graduated something like 350 poets in that time. So there's no pigeonholing black poetry anymore. The range is as wide as can be.
It's wonderful.
And these poets have won, the Laughlin Prize, National Poetry Series prizes, Ruth Lilly Fellowships. A lot of them have been PSA chapbook winners, I'm happy to say. And it's just an amazement. And then that is also followed by the Asian American Writers Alliance, the Kundiman Fellowship, and the Letras Latinas. And so I think American poetry is wonderfully diverse now. And because it is wonderfully diverse, more and more people are attracted to it and to the incredible resources of poetry, the strength of poetry, all that can be done expressively in poetry. And of course, I think it's steadily women have been gaining in attention. We have the collected poems of Lorene Niedecker, who was so unknown for decades, and then when Jenny Penberthy came out, was it 7 years ago at the University of California, Niedecker, everybody discovered her. It was a new planet, really. And the collected June Jordan came out.
Yes.
Muriel Rukeyser, the Library of America, Elizabeth Bishop. Now we have the Library of America, Mae Swenson. The collected I just came out. The collected Denise Levertov is coming in the fall. So anyhow, this has occasioned on my part and our part as a staff at the PSA kind of interest in focusing on women, and we have a new series that's going to launch in Boston next October, and it's called The Landscape Listens, Women Poets and the American Experience. And I think that's a very empowering title.
It is.
And Kaneko Hahn gave it to me. I said to her, I have this subtitle, but I need a title. And so she threw me that line from Dickinson. There's a certain slant of light.
Yep,
right?
yep.
Anyway, it's a good title. And
what an exciting idea, though. Tell me what it'll involve.
Well, we're going to have a whole day of panels. There'll be 3 panels with 3 poets each discussing a predecessor whom they admire. Mm-hmm. Then we'll be welcome to. Major Jackson wants to talk about Muriel Rukeyser, and Kevin Young wants to talk about Anne Bradstreet by way of John Berryman, and I'm hoping C.D. Wright will talk about the Arkansas woman poet she kind of brought to light 10 years ago, and I hope somebody will focus on Niedecker, and maybe somebody will focus on Eleanor Wiley and Louise Bogan, and Elizabeth Alexander will probably focus on Gwendolyn Brooks and Lucille Clifton, and maybe somebody will shed some light on Margaret Walker. So during the day there'll be these panel discussions, and then in the evening the poets will all read the work of the predecessors and their own work that has been, influenced by it. And
fantastic.
I think it would be a very enshrining and illuminating kind of event. This year's series is called, after the County Cullen poem, Yet Do I Marvel, Black Iconic Poets of the 20th Century. And that is, we're going to D.C. and L.A. and Chicago and Los Angeles. The programs are going to be fantastic.
It seems to me that you, under your leadership, Poetry Society of America is getting out there more into the communities, into the neighborhoods, into the Rita Dove and I were talking about, during her laureateship, she wanted to make poetry more of a household word, make it alive again instead of the way it is sometimes considered in this country, this dusty thing up on the shelf from the 19th century of bearded pale males, as opposed to the vibrant, making you laugh and cry voice of and understand and joy of the immediate present. It sounds to me like the Poetry Society of America is flexing its muscle, and I'm delighted.
Oh, well, thanks, Robin. Well, one of the things that has really brought me joy is having big programs at Cooper Union, a tribute to Polish poetry after 9/11, because Adam Zagiewski made it so clear that we turned to that kind of witness poetry at that moment, and a tribute to Elizabeth Bishop for her centennial, a tribute to Larkin last year for his centennial, our own centennial at the PSA. These events of, maybe 20 poets on the stage sitting at cafe tables, each reading a single poem, and some music involved and some actors involved. Our Larkin tribute had Zadie Smith and Andrew Sullivan, the political columnist, and Paul Simon. To get an audience of 800 or 900, it's not the cognoscenti. It may be the cognoscenti at the core. You can count on maybe 300 or 400 people who know the poetry really well, but there are other people who encountered the poetry in the New Yorker.
Right.
They were younger, and they haven't read Elizabeth Bishop in a long time. They remember how much they loved Elizabeth Bishop, and they show up and they see that, all the poets on the stage, Asian American poets, and Elizabeth Alexander, Obama's, inaugural poet, reading in the waiting room, "You are an Elizabeth, you are an I."
Yes.
It's really very, very invigorating.
Well, it reminds me of the early days of the women's movement this time around, the contemporary wave in the 70s, when suddenly, every poet is used to 12 people coming to a reading, and suddenly there were 1,000 people. Any return to that kind of vibrancy, much less pushing it forward, is very welcome. I want to take a minute or two in the time we have left to talk about Bishop, though, because you raised her, and I know that you are beginning to wind up, tell me if I'm wrong, a huge task of editing the letters and diaries, yes?
Yes. Well, there are all of her journals and notebooks. Starting with a walking trip she took to Newfoundland when she was at Vassar, and then a trip right after college to Cuttyhunk in 1934. And then going up through her early travels to Ireland and to France, to Italy, to fascist Italy, and to Spain, and she was in Spain in July of 1934. You can imagine what those
Wow. These haven't been covered before, to my knowledge.
I think that Brett Millier in her wonderful biography of Bishop drew upon them, but they haven't been published, and it's almost 500 pages.
Wow.
No, they're wonderful, really, really wonderful, and they come up all the way to 1975, and when she's summering on North Haven, Maine, and
so of course they cover the Brazilian years.
Oh, yes, they do. But although the Brazilian notebooks are really the letters that she wrote while traveling within the country of Brazil to her partner Lotta back in Rio or up in Petropolis.
Yes.
She always said that her letters to Lotta were her journals from her travels in Brazil, and so we've gathered those letters.
Wow. I want to put one thing to rest as long as I have you here as an expert on Bishop, whose work I love, as every poet pretty much does. But, for years she confounded feminists because she refused to be collected in any anthology of feminist poetry or women's poetry, and yet she clearly was one. And she herself said, "I am a strong feminist." So it's not true that she was anti-feminist, and I'd like to clear that up. Help me.
Well, she was at Vassar in the 30s, from 1930 to 34, and working with Eleanor Clark and Muriel Rukeyser and Mary McCarthy on a literary magazine. They were reading W.H. Auden, whom she admired particularly for his sexual and personal courage. She said reading Auden made us feel in the know, in the now, really on top of our moment. And she was very sensitive to sexual politics and to figures of courage in homosexual life. But I just feel she did not want to be sequestered and compared only to women poets. Her favorite poets were Hopkins, Herbert, and Baudelaire. Although she admired many poets,
so different from Marianne Moore, who was an influence on her. Baudelaire and Marianne Moore, two opposite ends of the pole.
Yeah. But she has a wonderful diary entry about religious poetry, in which she says religious poetry is about as good as it gets. And so I that's a little aside, Robin. That doesn't speak to your point, but there's no question that she was very proud of her partner Lotta's accomplishments as an architect, and her work on Flamingo Park and in Rio. She had very strong friendships with women who were musicologists and curators at museums. She was proud of the accomplishments and achievements of women, but she really felt it was important to get your rank in poetry from the whole heritage of poetry.
Right. I think that also there was a generational difference, because then there came a period with Adrienne, for example, Rich, of affirming the separation, and then it's like it's sort of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. But in any event, wherever she published, I'm awfully glad that she did. Thank you so much, Alice, for doing this and for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Many thanks, Robin.
We have to take a short pause here at Women's Media Center Live with me, Robin Morgan. But we'll be back shortly with a brief touch of verbal karate, and then with the joy that is Joy Harjo, the well-known Native American poet, musician, and author. So don't go away.
Parkinson's disease affects as many as 1 million people in the United States. This April, during Parkinson's Awareness Month, the Parkinson's Disease Foundation focuses on the millions of women who live with Parkinson's or who care for a partner with Parkinson's. Learn how to make a difference and help improve research, care, and support for these women by visiting www.pdf.org or calling 800-457-6676.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome back. This week, verbal karate is in the form of honoring someone who uses it. Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard has survived another challenge, this time to her leadership of her own party, that's the Labour Party. 2 senior ministers, a junior minister, and 3 party officials involved with the failed putsch have been fired or quit. Gillard is unashamedly feminist in her policies, and she is the first head of government in the world to name sexist names and openly denounce the sexism and misogyny she has personally experienced in politics. This is something you just don't do. The country's first female prime minister, she's been attacked by men of all opposition parties as well as men of her own party. She publicly told one opposition leader, Tony Abbott of the Liberal Party, that if he wanted to know what the face of misogyny looked like, he should pick up a mirror. Among his shocking statements, by the way, are, if it's true that men have more power, generally speaking, than women, is that such a bad thing? So last October, she delivered what has been now termed the misogyny speech. It's on YouTube if you want a thrill and to get your blood really coursing through your veins. In it, she let loose on how women politicians are treated by colleagues, the media, the system. Single and child-free in Australia's heavily masculinist culture, Gillard was once described by a parliamentarian from the Conservative Party as being, quote, deliberately barren. The insults continue, but she has become a heroine to women, even across party lines, and she has now triumphed over an attempted coup in her own partisan backyard. So, in honor of Name It, Change It, the Women's Media Center's newly released report on how sexism affects women candidates and how talking back to sexism also positively affects races, in honor of that, we dedicate today's verbal karate to Prime Minister Julia Gillard of Australia. She's won her verbal karate black belt. And our next guest is Joy Harjo, who has graced this program with her voice and artistry before. She's a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation and of Cherokee descent. She's a major literary figure in the current Native American Renaissance. She has published 15 books of poems, a memoir, children's books, and she's released numerous recordings of her readings and music. She's the recipient of many honors, including the American Book Award and the PEN Open Book Award. Welcome back, Joy, to Women's Media Center Live.
Well, I'm glad to be back. Thank you.
Well, you're one of our poets on this show, and I wanted to ask you what has been happening on the Native scene with young women poets.
Actually, that's a really good question. There's a new anthology out called As/Us, A Space for Women of the World. And it's an anthology put together by 3 co-founders, all young Native women, Tanea Winder, Cassandra Lopez, and Christine Trudeau. And it's very exciting. I mean, they're publishing Native women and then women all over the world. They also have a website. And it's an exciting anthology. It's on, I think it's online, and it's also, they just put out the book, and they're already accepting work from Indigenous women and women of color all over the world.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. I'm going to get it. You, in a sense, you started this back in, I think it was the late 90s with, wasn't it called Reinventing the Enemy's Language? It was a book on contemporary Native women's writing of North America. And I remember it well. It was one of the very first to give access to those voices. Well,
yes, and it's still in print. But yes, so this journal is very exciting, and it's asusjournal.org.
Okay. And what about Joy Harjo? She has been on the road a lot, yes? What are you doing these days?
I've been performing. I'm working on new music. I have a commission from the Public Theater in New York for a play that would reinstate Indigenous people to the story of the origins of blues and jazz. Writing poetry as usual, music, and teaching for 8 weeks at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign.
Oh, real lazy, huh? Yeah, not just slothful. Yes, we talked the last time that you were on the show about the idea of the native contribution to jazz, which I found fascinating. I can't wait for this play, and the fact that it'll be at the public in my own backyard is really exciting. We're going to pause for a few minutes here for the playing of a remarkable poem and music. Tell us what we're going to hear.
Yes, this is The Woman Hanging from the 13th Floor. It's the music version, and I found when I do music and when I sing something, it shifts. I basically rewrote the poem into a song. I played saxophone on the song, and then I sing the poem. I recorded it some time back, but I've never released this particular version, so I'm thinking about doing that. I've also got a live album I'm working on and so on. But the poem came about from going to the Indian Center in Chicago and seeing a rocking chair there. And in that rocking chair, I kept seeing several different people, children, people who'd come in from the different reservation areas. And then eventually there was one woman who sat in that chair, and she refused to move until I told her story. And that's the song.
Oh, wow. Okay. Woman Hanging from the 13th Floor Window.
She's a woman hanging from the 13th floor. Her hands are pressed against the tenement building. She hangs from the 13th floor with a swirl of birds. They could be a halo or a storm of glass waiting to crush her. And we hear her crying, set me free. Set me free, set me free, set me free. Woman hanging from the 13th floor is not alone. She's a woman of the brand new baby. She's her mother's daughter and her father's son. She's all the women of the apartment building who stand watching her. And we hear them crying, set us free, set us free, set us free, set us free. She sees the lake of sadness lapping at the shore. She shoulders neon and all the tender stars. The city gleams at night with promise. She sees other women hanging, counting their lives in the palms of their hands, and their children are singing, set them free, set them free, set them free, set them free. She was young, she ate wild rice on scraped down plates in warm wood rooms. It was in the farther north, and she was a baby then. They rocked her, and her mother would sing, bye, oh baby, bye, oh baby, 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 baby. When you coming back home, baby, I've missed you so long, baby. Floor hears other voices. Some of them scream out from below for her to jump. They would push her over. Others cry softly from the sidewalks, pull their children up like flowers and gather them into their arms. They would help her like themselves. She thinks of her father, she thinks of her mother, she thinks of the brand new baby. She thinks of all the men, she thinks of the color of her skin, she thinks of all the women she has been. She thinks of waterfalls and pines. The sun falls west over the gray plain of the city. Her heart breaks open. She climbs back up to claim herself again. Set me free, set me free, set me free. I will overcome, I will overcome, I will overcome. Set me free, baby, 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 baby. Fire, baby. My sweet baby, 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 baby.
Okay. There's something specially magical, Joy, about the combination of words and music, of poetry and music. And when the poet is playing sax as well, it's a triple threat. So thank you for that. And people can get a hold of that. Is that recording available yet, or will that be on the next album?
I probably put it on the next album. I don't know what the next album is called yet. I always wind up with several titles. But it will be on the next title, or I will release it as a single.
All right. And what are you working on otherwise right now? A new book of poems, or didn't one just come out recently?
No, you know what just came out, actually, and the paperback will be out soon, and also the paperback for another book.
That's what I was thinking of.
Crazy Brave.
Yes.
Crazy Brave, memoir, and that seems to be, it's getting out there in the world. And the other book is a book from Wesleyan University Press, Soul Talk, Song, Language, Conversation through Joy Harjo. That's also going to be out in paperback.
One of the things I love about you, there's a lot, but one of the things is that you're a woman of letters. I mean, that there's prose, there's essays, there's anthologies, there's poetry. And when I was a kid and I first learned the phrase men of letters, I thought, men of letters, they can do anything they want. And I thought, I want to be that, but I never could I find anywhere a woman of letters, The phrase didn't seem to exist, but we're doing it. We're putting it into reality,
That's great. I never thought of it quite like that, because I ran away from letters for so long. I think the spirit of poetry came and grabbed me, but I was so terrified of words. And then here we are.
Were you really terrified of words?
Yes, I was.
My God. Do you know why?
I'm not sure, actually. I knew that I felt more comfortable in the world in the space behind the words or beyond the words. And of course, writing is always, writing is really about those spaces that the words carry.
That's right. That's right. But you come of a tradition also where chanting and oral poetry was very strong.
It is very strong, and there's a lot of respect for the power of words and what the effects that words can bring about in the world. Yeah.
Unlike other cultures we could name, Well, it's been great having you with us, and it's been great hearing the combination of the music and the poetry, which is very special. So you are one of our celebrants for April being not just the cruelest month, as T.S. Eliot said, but the month of poetry as well. Thank you so much for coming back, and come back again, okay?
Thank you so much, Robin, and thank you for all you do.
It's break time. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I haven't stopped being Robin Morgan yet. We are going to return in a moment with one of America's most honored and loved living poets, Rita Dove. Be right back.
When it comes to talk radio, men still do most of the talking. It doesn't get too much better if you look at television, newspapers, film, video games, social media, literature, sports, and corporate or technology leadership. The Women's Media Center's Status of Women in the U.S. Media 2013 report details the persistent gender disparity in a range of media institutions that rank among the greatest influencers in American society. To read the full report, go to womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
And welcome back. Now, Rita Dove's accomplishments and honors. Well, here's just a sample. The 1987 Pulitzer Prize in Poetry, the 1996 National Humanities Medal, the youngest ever person and the first African-American woman to be named Poet Laureate of the United States from 1993 to 1995, and awardee of the National Medal of the Arts presented by President Obama in 2011. More importantly, she's published plays, essays, lyrics, short stories, a novel, Washington Post newspaper columns, and has edited a poetry anthology. Most importantly, she has written some fine poems. Welcome, Rita, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you, Robin.
Well, it's a joy to have you here, and it is a special joy to reconnect with you and to let our listeners listen in on a conversation with a woman who wrote the lines, Billie Holiday's Burned Voice. Oh, my God, Rita, in a poem that begins with that line and then ends with the line, if you can't be free, be a mystery. Oh, wow. Poet to poet. Hats off.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. That line has been a kind of I think it was a mantra for a certain generation of women who just come up to me and say, yeah, been there, know that, so thank you.
Well, you are justly celebrated, but the marvelous thing to me is the humility of your voice. You've said that you were committed to writing about the underside of history, and starting with Thomas and Beulah, the book about your grandparents, you've kept that promise. It's not a pretentious voice. It's a voice of deceptive simplicity and incredible lyricism.
Thank you so much. I mean, I couldn't be any other way. To me, it seems that all of us, human beings, actually live our lives in details and in those ordinary moments that mean incredibly much to us, and then you realize they will never make it into the history books. And I think as a woman and as an African American, I grew up always seeing both sides of the story, growing up seeing, this is what gets played out there, and this is the real life that goes on. So when I began to write, it was the real life that was the most exciting that I wanted to write about. You
come from a very interesting family, too. Let's take a minute and talk about that. Your dad was the first black research chemist who broke the race barrier in the tire industry?
Yes, he was. Of course, I didn't know that when I was growing up, and it's interesting. My parents were I think they were careful about making sure that we grew up without seeing all those kind of landmarks, if it were possible. Mm-hmm. So my father was, all I knew was that he was a scientist and that he worked very hard, and I could see him preparing for the presentations and things like that. And it wasn't until I was in college that I found out that he, in fact, had broken this barrier.
Interesting.
And I asked him, I said, why didn't you tell us when we were growing up? And he said, I wanted you to grow up with as little bitterness as possible. I wanted you to think that the horizon was yours to take as far as you could, and there was no need for me to lay that burden on you, which meant that he carried it.
And your grandparents, say a few words about Thomas and Beulah.
The Thomas and Beulah were my maternal grandparents. They're based on my maternal grandparents.
Yes.
Actually, my grandmother's name was Georgiana, but that messes up any line of poetry. So I changed her name. But they came up from Tennessee. My grandfather came up from Tennessee, truly on a riverboat, and my grandmother came from Washington, D.C. originally, and they met in Akron, Ohio. And when I first conceived of the book, Thomas and Beulah, was probably when I was about 13. It's when my first curiosity began to grow, because I spent an entire summer practically every weekend with my grandmother, because my grandfather had died, and my parents said, well, you can't date yet. They were rotating people who would stay with my grandmother. And so since I wasn't allowed to date yet, I had the weekend, shift. She began to reminisce about her husband. He had led this life of playing playing in a little band and going up the river in the Mississippi on a riverboat. And
wow.
I thought, what is, and in that kind of arrogance of youth, I assumed, of course, I was the center, and my grandparents were, revolved around me. So from that moment on, I think I wanted to discover who they were, how they made it, what it was like to be to end up in the North after coming up from the South, and to make their way, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, you've unearthed and transformed through art a lot of African American history. The work that you did on the book, in fact, on Rosa Parks was amazing. Just recently on the show we had Jean Theo Harris. I don't know if you know she's coming out with just came out with a new biography of how, in fact, deeply political and radical Rosa Parks was, and how her image was tamed for acceptability.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. And it was it's an incredible piece of our history, of how they made her palatable in order to get this movement, jump started.
They did the same thing with Coretta Scott King, who in her own right was, it's very interesting. Now, something also that I want to talk about in terms of your work is the musicality. People are very afraid of poetry still, and one of the lovely things when you were laureate is that you pledged to try to help make poetry a household word, because somehow in our schools people are raised to fear and tremble at this dusty thing that was written by 19th century white men, pale males with beards, instead of this living, breathing thing that makes you laugh and cry and sit around the campfire the way poetry was born,
Exactly, yes.
And both the black movement, civil rights movement, and the women's movement at their inception expressed a lot of politics through poetry. Those were poetry readings where, 1,000 people showed up.
Yes, exactly. And everybody was chanting and singing by the end.
Exactly. Yeah. And poets, of course, are used to 12 people showing up, So it was a shock to my system, but a very welcome one. And your voice brings that back in part because of your subject matter, your choice of subject matter, but also because of your language and your musicality. I know that you play the cello or the viola da gamba, or both, is it?
Well, actually, yes. I started playing the cello. I played it all through my 20s and 30s, and then switched to the viola da gamba, and began playing early music. And then when I couldn't carry my instruments around with me because I was traveling too much, I began taking voice lessons. I can't imagine not having music with me in my life. And I think that and it doesn't matter what kind of music it is either. I mean, though I was trained classically, actually, and love to sing opera, but I also love to sing jazz and blues, and and it just music.
It's music, yeah.
Yeah, it's music, and I know that comes from growing up around music, all kinds of music. The great storytellers of my youth, the women who could say, "Oh, well, let me tell you, and the whole voice would do that thing, and you were caught.
You got my attention.
Yes, and you said okay, because this person knows that part of the way that it's how you tell a story that's going to work. So I think that's where my roots come from, and my absolute belief that if a poem doesn't sing, I don't see what the point of it is. Well, it has to sing in some way. It has some different kind of music, but I remember when I was poet laureate, one of the things that really shocked me was how many people were afraid of poetry. I mean, I knew that they were, but not to that extent. And I would get letters from people who said, they always started off with, I don't know much about poetry. But
yep, right.
Or I really don't. Always this kind of disclaimer, this fear of, well, I might be caught out and be thought uneducated and dumb, and then they would what follow would be the most incredible testimonies about a particular poem and how it changed their life.
Yes.
And I said, how did we come so far in this world that the thing that opens our hearts to each other has become such a feared thing? And that was one I made really a kind of formal pledge that I would always be on the side to bring poetry.
Well, you followed through on that. I think during your tenure as poet laureate, more people paid attention, and also because you were a musical, dramatic voice for poetry, and because you were the youngest ever to hold the post. My congratulations. And because you were the first African-American woman. So a lot of the dispossessed, the disenfranchised could claim you, and you took that responsibility and ran with it, for which I personally thank you as well. You going to share a poem with us today?
Yes, I'd love to. I was thinking about what poem to read and to share with you, and I thought I would read a poem out of a book that's called Mother Love.
Love it.
It's a book of sonnets, actually, mostly sonnets, written when my daughter was just about 10 or 11, that age when they begin to grow away from you, and you want them to. You want them to become their own woman, but also you don't want them to.
And she grew up and now writes for Ms. magazine.
Yes, she does, which I couldn't be prouder. It's just so wonderful.
I'm grinning here. I'm just sitting here grinning. I love it. Go ahead.
Yes. So this is based on the Persephone Demeter myth, a classical myth of daughters and mothers separating. Persephone falling. One Narcissus among the ordinary beautiful flowers, one unlike all the others. She stooped to pull harder, when, sprung out of the earth on his glittering, terrible carriage, he claimed his due. It is finished. No one heard her. No one. She had strayed from the herd. Remember, go straight to school. This is important. Stop fooling around. Don't answer to strangers. Stick with your playmates. Keep your eyes down. This is how easily the pit opens. This is how one foot sinks into the ground.
An accomplished sonnet that also breaks the heart. You were quoted as saying at one point that you thought it was important to acknowledge the human face of evil. And I remember that stuck with me because it's so crucial. It's another form of Hannah Arendt's The Banality of Evil. But as long as evil is made this thing that is superhuman or subhuman, then of course you don't have to take responsibility for it in ourselves, the Eichmann within.
I agree entirely. I think that when I made that comment, I made it specifically in terms of a poem of mine called Parsley, which deals with the Trujillo, the Dominican Republic, the Haitian massacre in the Dominican Republic in 1937, where he actually killed 20,000 Haitian blacks. And the only way he had of distinguishing them was having them pronounce a Spanish word with an R in it. And because they spoke a French Creole, they couldn't roll that R, like in a Spanish R. And I thought, this was such a horrific thing, but it also was terribly, terribly creative.
Yes.
And I did not want to go there. I did not want to write about it. But I also thought that the ability for us to say, oh, that's evil, that's off to the side, it's too horrific, and therefore I don't want to think about it, also gives us the privilege of thinking that we have no kernels of cruelty in us as well.
Precisely.
Poetry also is particularly suited for doing, and that is to talk about all aspects of life, to reveal all aspects of life to us, and to help us get through it by bringing it out, so that we say, oh yeah, I felt that, or, oh yes, this someone else has also seen how terrifying this is.
Recognition is such a subversive thing, isn't it? If you can recognize, whether through laughter or through tragedy or through poetry. I mean, it's and then if you can move to empathy, that's the most subversive emotion of all.
Absolutely.
If you had to name what would be your greatest regret, or if you have no regrets, then your greatest sadness in life, what would that be? And comparably, what would you say would be your greatest pride?
Oh, my goodness. My greatest regret. Oh, there are so many, I think. There really are. I regret. This is. I don't even know if this is the greatest regret. But one of the regrets I have is that when I was in college, when I was in school, that I didn't dare to take some of the courses that I wanted to take, that I thought, they were outside of my discipline, that I did not, take Portuguese, or Chinese, things that I was very curious about, because, you had to get to school, you had to get your good grades, and though I did take a lot of courses, I think it was a failure of bravery on my part, and to do that, and I think that something that has always kind of propelled me for the rest of my life to not be afraid to do something that I'm going to be bad at.
Well, you're good at so many things, my dear.
But I think that all of us are, in some ways, we it doesn't feel good to be bad at anything, and yet I want to be a student all my life. So that's really one of my greatest regrets.
And your greatest pride?
My greatest pride is my daughter. It's that she can walk through the world with a confidence that I didn't have, and with that she's also absolutely engaged, and I say that engaged, in the struggle, that she's a really smart, thinking human being who also seems to be kind of fearless and much savvier than I was at her age. So that confidence that she has, and that belief that she can just go out there, she can do this, that is my greatest pride.
Well, understandably. It's amazing how many extremely smart, extremely accomplished, extremely feminist women, when I ask this, name their children. Mm-hmm. Because it's a human being.
Yes, and also they are the next generation. They're going to carry it on. And I really think that you should feel, I want to say, you should feel a little pride in that accomplishment, too, because you helped make that daughter of mine.
Well, that's quite an honor.
Absolutely.
I am decidedly auxiliary proud of your daughter and of my son, and of all our children and of ourselves, and of you, because although the poet part of you is the dearest part to me, you're a woman of letters. I mean, there are plays, there are novels, there are... If anybody listening to this has not recently read or reread Rita Dove, you have such a treat in store for you. And I thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live, and send you lots of love.
Oh, thank you, Robin. This was really wonderful. It's wonderful to reconnect, and love back.
And now it's time for Fighting Words. And this week, Fighting Words could also, all of these three items could just as easily have fit in the surrealism corner, but they all got my pulse racing. Two of them could be termed Dubious Victories Department or Great Leaps Sideways. One is that in Saudi Arabia, where, as you'll remember, women cannot drive, women have now been allowed by the religious police to bicycle, and they can even ride a motorcycle if, three things, if it's only for recreational purposes, in other words, not to work or school where they need it, if they are accompanied by a man, and if they are wearing the full abaya, which is not only the full veil floor length, but the niqab, which leaves only little slits for your eyes to look out of. So, if you're accompanied by a man having, quote, fun, and a movable bolt of cloth, you are permitted to ride a bike. That's one. Two is in Israel, the women at the wall, who you may recall have been trying to pray and wear prayer shawls and phylacteries the way that the men do, the religious men do, for a very long time. They've taken it to court. They've been arrested. Well, Nathan Sharansky was appointed by the Prime Minister to evolve a compromise. The compromise involves expanding the existing area of prayer to create a section with access for Jews wishing to pray in a non-Orthodox or more egalitarian style. So the good news is that the women have accepted this and are taking it as a triumph. The not so good news is that the rabbis, the Orthodox rabbis, say, well, it's not the real wall anyway, so we don't give a damn. And the really not so good news is that this area, this new area, involves construction in what is now an archaeological park and an important area, wait for it, for Muslims in the vicinity of Al-Aqsa Mosque. So it could take years to be realized, and basically the women have been given contended territory. Isn't that helpful? And last, North Korea. In rattling its sabers recently, they have decided to blame the first woman president of South Korea, Park Geun-hye. Now, Park Geun-hye is not our sort of person. She's a dictator's daughter. She acts like a dictator. She's sort of a Margaret Thatcher type person in her politics and her carriage. However, she does not deserve to be treated in a sexist fashion. Criticize her for her policies, but not for being a woman. But the North said that all of the problems in the Korean Peninsula and the recent ill will is due to her venomous swish of a skirt. Yeah, that was to blame. It's a reference to an old Korean expression describing a woman who forgets her place. So, when you're on your way to ride your bike or to put on your prayer shawl, I hope you flip your prayer shawl or your abaya or your skirt or more likely your pants cuff with a venomous swish. And that's our show for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS station 1580 AM radio in Washington, D.C., and on the web at WMClive.com, which also has podcasts of our previous shows. Remember to email us, womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here don't represent the WMC, and here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams Chancellor, Technical Director Michelle Kinsey Bruns, and our founding sponsor Regina Kulik Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thanks for being with us, and join us next week when we depart even further from our usual format with a show focusing on women and jazz. Not that politics won't still be present. How could it not be? Here on Women's Media Center Live.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.